I'm gonna switch it to. Actually, never mind. Let's do it like that.
Yeah.
Perfect. And then you just let it go. And then when you edit it, you just click
Like I
it.
know Michelle was there.
Okay. Yeah. I could also go over the end if you would, like outside of the like revise the picture.
Melissa.
That's good for you.
Davis.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's what
She's
it
really
is.
good about
It was
All right, I'll be back
but the bottom line is tomorrow,
Okay,
maybe at one time.
but I'll find out.
And maybe Rhode Island has some state tax that you don't. And they were way under the limit for federal taxation.
I just.
So it didn't make any sense.
Right.
So I asked her.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, they do, and I'm sure they
Yeah.
paid heavily for that.
Right, then it's not,
But it
yeah.
was also old. It was an old trust. So, anyway, it just made the plan that we put in place.
Good,
made sense.
it's, I know,
And then
yeah.
after he passed.
It's not just the
Right.
color, but
Right.
Starbucks, your band.
And I
Right,
said,
no, I understand,
Yeah,
yeah,
so-
completely understand. Yeah.
take him off the board, take him off the deed, that's all you have to do. She's like,
I looked up online.
Yeah.
And,
She said, but the trust doesn't, the trust doesn't exist, that's why we got rid of the trust, so you don't have to do any of that.
Darcy's good for money.
Oh, okay.
So.
Good morning.
Are you ready? I'll find out, if not today, tomorrow, I'll find out, let you know.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, 'cause I don't know.
So has it been so far?
Because there's the Tuesday morning and Rachel, she's a realtor, she started the group and then
Today's only
they're
the
starting a new one on
14th, right?
Friday.
They only get better.
And Heather Holzman,
Yeah.
Holzman, she's a realtor and she's also a roofing company, so it's a roofing company. So I don't know if she's her realtor or is a roofer or what, so. But let me find out, because that one's just starting up this week.
Little wins.
And that one's gonna be really focused on home services for
Oh,
some.
yeah, that's right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. Right, right, I agree, yes, yeah. And then you have WOW, but that's not the same as a lead script per se, so yeah.
And you know,
Yeah. So I'll let you know.
You're really well.
So I assume just PowerPoint?
She's thrown a couple of resumes out into the wind.
Welcome,
just to
folks.
have backup plan.
We feel free to grab some stuff.
They're looking for a letter opener.
Which,
I don't even know where to get that.
down right now.
Size. Place like home. Oh, yeah. I walked around that place.
that much.
And I could not. And like, I don't know if they just go fast.
Yeah.
It's not really Jason anymore.
Well, I could be too. Very confused.
They make the threats and they forget about it.
I was gonna say, maybe official.
When they do statements.
I know they like that. So it is, yeah.
National Center of
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
She last time she shut down, they were
Oh, she must-
doing it, and then the government shut down, so there was nobody to like.
Nobody took action.
Yeah.
Nobody took action to shut down.
Yeah, so everything just kind of went as normal. And now nobody. Yeah. We don't know either.
That's a little comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, especially for somebody who's autistic and loves to have everything.
I think it's cute.
Yeah.
I don't
It's okay for us to make a run for you.
Oh, is this a wide fold door? Expand it.
It's a,
58
it's a lifestyle that actually is what creation.
It's right on that, or now Wee Ridge Foundry. Yeah, just south of that one right there.
Because I was using it.
So Heather and Kimberly, I know, Silver Sport Network, and from dogs.
That's because I've never.
Yeah, I saw that. I started to see all kinds of stuff from there.
So he's the, I thought it was something like this, so he's the manager of all the engineers at
You can use it as a lead if you want to, but there's no requirement.
That's where you might put it.
Right, so it's not like industry.
And it's more like a resource. Like, I'm more likely to get a call from Silver Sport because my business is there and they need to
Oh, you feel it out there.
But I get lots of referrals.
I jot down
As far as I can tell, I mean, I don't always, people don't always know who referred them, they're like,
So
oh.
the top two lines, I
Yeah.
think, but for some reason I'm thinking
But
it
yes.
was the size of other stuff.
Oh, yeah, that could be.
13 years.
Washington, Oregon.
We got that done.
Yep.
You know what I mean, there's no.
But I haven't, but I've been licensed for 37 years. So it's just the area, that's the regulation.
I visited.
I don't work at,
They're always
but it's already.
Norfolk, so that connection stuff, so
Or, yeah,
like an hour from Virginia.
yeah.
No, that's yeah.
Those are my
Washington
referrals.
State or Washington
Yeah,
DC?
yeah, yeah, no. I was good. They're in the military, so.
Oh.
That's how we moved. Part of this.
Yeah, this is really fun. This is only the second time I've been out here.
But yeah, every time you go.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
You forget until I go back and I'm like.
Yeah, it's been a long time. And I can't remember
This is
who invited me the first time.
Yeah.
But it was probably Kevin.
Huh.
Who invited me here the first time.
Should you, are you Bill and Giselle?
Yes.
Okay, let's check you guys off, thank you.
Okay, I am gonna go into it.
Okay, yep.
And can I get a 5-minute warning?
Yeah.
Okay. Here.
Did you have some good break from holiday season?
Yeah. My husband was off for 2 weeks and I
Yeah, I
was,
saw you
but-
traveling, or like going out quite a bit.
Yeah, we tried to do
It's
some
very
good stuff. Yeah, Christmas was just me and him, the cat, dog, and bird, which was perfect. We did a rib roast and no stress, no drama.
Yeah.
So that was nice. That was good.
Mine was probably the opposite.
Well, you had a big
Between the family and the kids and the
Yeah.
cooking and the.
Yeah, we had none of that, and I was actually all right with that.
I thought that guy was.
And it was,
Right?
yeah, the dog was so excited to open all her gifts, the bird was ripping her gifts open, I mean, we had a great time, Vinny. And they had fun.
The birds get excited.
Oh, yeah, it's Christmas, she's ripping open the things, throwing them, she throws everything.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Oh,
Now she's starting.
Dog, it's just a dog.
I don't know where she's got that from, probably from one of the
She's a-
videos. Oh, yeah, she's an African gray parrot, yeah, she says lots of things. But now
Maybe
she's-
she overheard you saying that.
Have you ever seen
I
her?
haven't seen her, no, but I put on like different gray things for her, you know, African gray, parrots, music, she got it from somewhere, she started the other day. My husband's talking and she's going, oh, it is hilarious, and she does it right on
You
cue.
don't take care of the.
She loves my husband, so he's walking around with her on the shoulder, and he goes to give me a kiss, and she looks at me, and she goes, sit down. And she bites him in the neck, I walk away, and she goes,
Really?
Some attitude, huh?
oh, yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, my
She
goodness.
definitely knows what she's doing, and when she's saying,
My friend's parent will say,
I mean, they'll
There
find
were
problems.
especially when it recognizes, when
There were
it
for
hears voices
sellers,
and like,
that's
doesn't
a real
recognize,
estate agent.
he'll
You can be a
say,
seller's agent or buyer's.
I didn't bury anybody in the rose garden or something.
Oh my goodness.
And
Some
and she has no
situations.
clue
But it's written
where
in the
reference
contract.
is.
But in a road.
Sounds like a movie.
You better
Like
check
from a
out your
movie.
road garden.
come on in.
Hi.
How are you?
Managers of their own, realtor of their own.
You registered?
That's okay.
Sellers gets all of the
We're just getting ready to get started.
money, the commission, and then, but they still represent you, not the buyer.
And then this here is, our upcoming, so it has the whole year on it. I don't know.
But that's
there's
about-
So just the counselor, yeah.
Yes.
It's a pocket hug.
Yes.
We did a thing at Deb Cruiser and I did a thing at Community Center. You're welcome. Feel free to grab the phone, grab the register, I have one person show up. But that person hired them to find a living situation for him. Dad hired me to be his estate planner, and then daughter hired me to do the estate plan for the daughter. Well, so I never
You never
told
know.
him.
Yeah, you never know.
By
No.
design. And also, I mean, at a minimum, we gave her a ton of resources.
Right.
Even if she hadn't signed up to do stuff with us. She went home having all of her questions answered, and it was just a really feel-good experience to know that that person came for something and they got more than they asked for.
But I would suggest, we are live streaming, because not all seniors can. Yeah, and then you will have a recording, so you can
still want video?
Yeah,
Okay.
to your internet.
Okay.
I just go back and visualize and here's,
Well, that's your
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
It is kind of hard to find if you define someone not needed to consider or remind.
I walk when I talk, so,
Oh, okay.
so,
Stay kind of,
you can talk.
it goes to,
Here, do you want your?
Yeah, can I see?
Okay.
yeah, so just come in past the board.
How do you, can you see that?
Right there,
tiny
right there, right
screen?
there.
Okay.
So about right there.
Okay.
Here we go.
So yeah, put that there, yep.
Tape dispenser? Alright, so that's
And then-
where we need to be, tape in our, see what our,
Oh, right there.
Right, yeah,
Okay.
back just, right,
Make sure you're in front.
right about there, yep.
cause I always tend to.
Orange marker.
Okay.
Send it to the orange marker.
Find that.
That's how trim you get.
Do you want me to set the tape dispenser and the orange marker out there so you can see? Nah, I think.
Yeah, that would be helpful. So it's roughly this to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there you go.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
I can do that.
This is where you're staying, this is where you're staying.
So, yeah, there we go. That is black and you will trip over that. Trip hazard. What's that red thing over there?
It's, an iPad or something. Will you see that?
That might be better.
Use this.
Oh, here, Brian's got his.
Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you. There we go. Put this way.
Sure. Perfect.
So stay between here and here. Gotcha. So good morning, everybody. Welcome to 2026 in the Aging Wisely Network. I'm Kimberly Diaz. I am one of the founders of the group. We also have Sherry Cree and Renata Anderson. And today we're going to have Jessie Rember speaking. She's an estate attorney that I know very well. And she's, let me just read her bio. So Jessie Rember is this.
Kimberly, you want to introduce the
Heather
staff
first.
sponsor?
Yeah, I was gonna do this and then do that.
Oh, okay.
Jessie Rember is an estate planning attorney dedicated to helping clients create thoughtful, effective estate plans that eliminate or minimize probate and administrative costs. Jessie places a strong emphasis on client education, taking the time to explain the estate planning process and documents in clear, understandable terms so clients can make informed decisions with confidence. Each plan is carefully tailored to reflect the unique goals and circumstances of the individual client. Jessie is actively involved in the Trust and Estate section of the Colorado Board Association. She serves as a statutory editor for several statute books published by the Colorado Bar Association for practitioners, and also is a contributor to the Senior Law Handbook. Outside of her practice, Jessie enjoys playing music, reading, crafting, and watching sports. I also want to introduce Heather Reed. She is our sponsor, our snack sponsor, and she's also a notary, so I'll give her a minute to talk about what she does, and then we'll have Jessie come right.
Thanks. I'm a mobile notary, so you can get things notarized by your bank. You don't need me. They'll do it for you for free, but they won't visit you in your home. They won't come to your hospital if you break an ankle, and they won't visit you in a care facility rehab center. So that's when you call me. On the back table, I've got a flow chart for notarizing for those with dementia and other disabilities or complicating issues. The bar for dementia really varies based on the purpose of whatever you're doing. So doctors have an entirely different standard for dementia. Lawyers have an entirely different standard for dementia. For a notary, dementia is a legal, it's a medical term with legal implications, and I am neither one. My lane is to figure out if you understand what you're doing at that moment. So, I am not there to be your doctor and figure out if you have dementia, and I'm not there to tell you the implications of the documents and whether your dementia is going to affect any of the documents you're dealing with. The reason that I am explaining all of that is that you probably know somebody who's experiencing some cognitive decline. And it doesn't mean that you can't take care of legal documents for them. It's always better to take care of things sooner, but there are a lot of things you can do to set them up for success. And that flow chart lists a lot of those things that you can do to help support them so that they can actually sign documents regardless of what the document purpose is. I hope that explains some things, and I hope you have a great day. Jessie's awesome. Thanks, Amy. Thanks for the snacks.
Well, hi, everybody.
Hi.
Man, Kimberly made me sound important. Made me feel kind of important. Okay, I have a lot of material. Feel free to interrupt and ask questions. And in case you cheated and looked at the back, these are your critical numbers, and I'm going to talk about these as we go. These are just a reminder for you when you're at home thinking about your estate plan and what you want to do. You have some benchmarks by which you can measure what estate planning documents are appropriate for you. Okay? So everybody needs an estate plan. I think I've had 2 clients in the last 13 years where I've said, you don't need an estate plan. And it's because an estate plan isn't just for after you die, it's for tomorrow, and the next day, and the next month, and the next quarter, and the next year, and maybe even the next 5 to 10 years. So if you're living and breathing, you need some level of estate planning. So a typical estate plan has either a trust or a will. If you get a trust, you will also get a will. If you don't, you should be asking questions. You get medical powers of attorney, you get financial powers of attorney, you get a living will, you get a HIPAA authorization, and you get a stuff list for all the stuff you have around your house that you want to, how do I say this delicately, dump on your children. Okay, so an estate plan covers both what you do tomorrow and what you're going to do, or what people are going to do for you after you die. So there's 2 things, there's kind of 2 elements in estate planning. And the first one is dealing with your actual estate. And that is the stuff that you have when you're alive that you want to distribute after your death. And the other part is probate, right? This is the after you die part. And people get very confused about probate. Everybody wants to avoid probate. And quite honestly, probate for most people is cheaper than having a trust. Depends on your situation, it depends on your family dynamics, it depends on about 5 factors. That's all I'm going to say about that. For now, we'll talk more about it as we go along. But I just want to be clear that all of the social media and the TV advertisements about everybody needs to have a trust is absolutely false. Certain people, certain families need trusts. Okay, I want to talk about something that nobody talks about, but it needs to be talked about, and that is, don't do your own estate planning. Honestly, just don't. I know the documents are free online. I know that the documents are small pay online, but there are 5 ways to distribute your house, to get rid of real estate. And if you don't know what those 5 ways are, how do you know how to fill in that blank? A lot of people do quitclaim deeds for their real estate, and that's an absolute mistake. There's a time and a place for a quitclaim deed. It's probably not your situation. I do a ton of deeds in my business because people file deeds and they don't know what they're filing. They don't know why they're filing it, and they get it wrong. I don't know how many legal descriptions and name changes I've had to do on deeds because people didn't fill the forms out correctly. So you are going to want to get some legal help, but don't call the guy on TV. If you call the guy on TV, here's some questions, here are some things that you need to go in prepared to discuss with them. And the first is, if they don't ask you what your goals are in creating an estate plan, that's a good time to walk away. Not everybody has the same goal. Estate planning isn't just about planning for death. It's a whole lot of what you want to do in your life and then what you want to have happen after your life. But those are your goals, not mine. I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to tell you what your choices are. You tell me what you're comfortable with. So if your attorney doesn't ask you about your goals, they're not creating an estate plan for you. They are printing a document that they got from someone else and filling in the blanks. Okay? If someone just flat out says to you, well, we're just going to draft a trust, that's a good time to walk away. And I will bet you that in most cases, the attorney cannot explain to you in language that you understand why you need that trust. And if they can't, you can walk. If they don't answer your questions in a way that you understand, you can walk. An attorney doesn't need to talk over your head. There's nothing so overly complex about estate planning that they can't talk to you about it in terms that you can understand. So if you feel like they're talking at you, this is not your attorney. And the last thing is, if they talk down to you, I've had other attorneys talk down to me. And you know what? They don't get referrals from me. If they talk to me that way, how are they going to talk to my clients? I'm really picky when I have to hire an attorney for something or I send a referral out. I don't refer anyone to anyone who doesn't handle their clients like I do. Know that you have a choice. You don't have to go to the first attorney you call. Be picky about it. Find somebody who talks to you and that you can relate with. I'll be honest with you, my estate plans largely come from the stories you tell me when you're sitting in my office. You tell me about your life. You tell me about your children. You tell me about your home. You tell me about what the things are that are important to you. That's how I draft your estate plan. If you're sitting across from an attorney who doesn't care, then you're not going to get an estate plan that's designed for you. Okay, questions? You like that?
I was just going to make a comment. I had a client that we had talked about that a beneficiary deed might be the best way for them to transfer the house to the son when they pass, and had referred him to an attorney. Well, they decided to do it online,
Yeah.
and the father passed, and so we thought, oh great, this is all taken care of. And they messed up the legal description.
Yeah.
So the beneficiary deed was no good.
Yeah.
And so we had to go through the whole process. Yeah, and it was a lot more involved than what they ever.
Yeah, and that's not a complex document,
No.
but if the legal description isn't correct, it's going to fail.
Yeah.
And the first thing I do when a client comes to me with real property is I pull an ownership and encumbrance report. And I'm always shocked at how many estate planning attorneys don't take that step.
Yeah.
Without that ownership and encumbrance report, you do not know who owns that property and how they hold that property.
And it's not always how you think.
It's not always what, yeah, it's not always what you think it is.
It's the same thing for the real estate.
Yeah.
Realtors, like a lot of realtors don't pull that report, and then they have a wrong person
Yeah.
listing a property.
Yeah, I would say that
Legally,
the number
not
one,
intentionally, but.
yeah, the number one corrective deed I have to make is because the name is misspelled or the middle initial is incorrect. Or it's a junior and not a senior. I mean, there's something defective about the deed, which then, if you're going to go to probate, it causes a lot of problems. And if you're going to do a beneficiary deed, it's going to cause the deed to fail. So now you're in probate anyway with an inaccurate deed. Okay, so estate plans have three basic parts. There's the testamentary documents. This is the after you die part. There are the power of attorney forms, which is the while you're alive part. And then there's the in-between, which is the living will. The living will is you are still alive, but you are not capable of making your own decisions. And so we allow, the living will allows you to kind of predetermine how you want that end of life to unfold for you. It's a nice document, but it really must come to you with some explanation. It's very detailed. There are a lot of decisions for you to make, and you are going to want some guidance in making those decisions. I can also amend all of those documents based on what you want. There is an anatomical gifts provision in my medical power of attorney form. There are 4 choices there, but I've had a lot of clients say, well, I want to be an organ donor, but there's something about my eyes. They can't have my eyes. So we write that in, right? Yeah. We tailor these documents to whatever it is that you need. So if you're printing it off from online, you don't have that option.
Question.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the medical power of attorney and a living will?
Okay. A living will are your end-of-life wishes. It covers 2 conditions. One is persistent vegetative state. The other is terminal condition. So you have to have been diagnosed by 2 independent physicians to have either of those conditions. You're making your own decisions up until the point that you can't. And clearly, in persistent vegetative state, you're probably not making your own decisions. So at that point, your living will takes over. The medical power of attorney functions to allow an agent to assist you in making decisions beforehand. For example, my husband had open heart surgery. While he was going through the recuperation process, I was his agent taking care of his medical care. Picked up his prescriptions, I had conversations with doctors. With a married couple, it's maybe not as important, but you can understand that if it's a child and maybe you don't share a last name, maybe there's no obvious connection between you and your kid that a doctor can look and see. Without that medical power of attorney, that physician's not going to talk to you.
At least they shouldn't.
Yeah, as they shouldn't, because, I mean, I'll just tell a quick story. When my daughter was a freshman at Colorado State, it was 2020, and the football team went out, and there's a freshman football player who got really, really hurt. They took him to ER at Poudre Valley. The roommate, who was also on the football team, panicked and called his parents in California and said, I don't know what to do. They won't talk to me. They don't know who I am. They won't talk to me. The parents called the hospital, and the hospital refused to talk to them because the hospital didn't know who these people were. And when you have a blended family where you may have 2 parents married in different families now, one of them may not have this kid's best intent. You want to make sure that this is the parent that the child would have chosen to speak on their behalf. They did not actually speak to a physician until he was out of emergency surgery and capable of identifying them as his parents. So without a medical power of attorney, this can create some huge problems. Okay, any other questions? Okay. All right, the rest of this, like documents you need while you're alive, medical power of attorney for sure, financial power of attorney for sure. Your financial agent gets to act on your behalf when you are unable to or unwilling to act for yourself. This includes moving money around your bank accounts. However, we can expand that authority as broad as you want to make it. We can also narrow it to specific transactions. If you just want them to be able to move money from a checking to a savings and vice versa, we can limit the authority to do that. If we want them to be able to sell your home, we have to give them that authority. That's not something that they automatically get.
So if the homeowner had financial power of attorney given to somebody, that person can sign the listing agreement?
They can't. If that's provided for in the, yes, that agent can do anything that the power of attorney document allows them to do.
With the quick
caveat that the person has to be alive.
Yeah, these the living will, the medical power of attorney, and the financial power of attorney die with you.
Right.
Once you're gone,
Those are no, yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that.
they don't. I get numerous calls from people. Well, I'm my mom's power of attorney. No, you're not a power of attorney. You're an agent. You're a person, not a piece of paper. But is your mom living or not? No. You are not her agent any longer. So, trust me, 90% of what I do in my business is education. Because this is not easy. For people who don't have a background in estate planning, even for lawyers who don't have a background in estate planning, these concepts are not that easy. Okay. The living will is the in-between document. That is something you are able to decide whether you want life-sustaining procedures. It's typically a ventilator, but it doesn't have to be. It could be something else. Or artificial nutrition and hydration. Since the last time I gave a talk, we have added progressive neurocognitive illness. Not all attorneys use that provision. There are a lot of attorneys who would like to see that a little more fleshed out by either the legislature or the courts. I put it in my documents because I have so many clients who are concerned about that. You're not required to fill out that section. And it only relates to artificial nutrition and hydration. There is a fine line between feeding someone and force feeding them, and doctors would like a little guidance as to where you think that line should be drawn. Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So at any point, I mean, if I fill out a living will, but then my husband's my medical power of attorney, and something happens, can he override the living will, or is the living will always, if it's there and the doctor has it, then they have to follow that living will?
So the living will is complex, and this is why it needs to come with some explanation, right? A living will is just a document. As long as you're making your own decisions, the living will doesn't come into play. Your agent, your medical agent, is your advocate, and one of the things they're going to advocate for is a doctor to adhere to your living will. However, I have lengthy conversations with my clients about whether you want your agent to be able to override your decisions. You can allow your agent to override all of your decisions or just some of them. So a standard provision in my living will includes my agent can override my decisions, but only with regard to the number of days I want life-sustaining procedure or artificial nutrition and hydration. Because I wanted that in my document, I figured some of my clients might want it too. You don't have to fill in that provision if that's not what you want. You don't have to initial that section. You can initial something else. But if I wanted it, I'm pretty sure other people would want it too. I have one kid in Europe. I have another kid at Camp Lejeune in the Marine Corps. I don't know how long it's going to take them to get home. I want my agent to be able to change the number of days to accommodate a blizzard in Denver when my kid is trying to get here from the UK. So I want some flexibility with regard to the number of days. But your other choices are, I don't want it at all, or I want it forever. I've had clients who have chosen all of those things. I don't judge, I just tell you what the ramifications of your choices are. And if there's something else that you want, let me know. I'll type it in there. I can type. I'm really fast, actually. I mean, I can put in there whatever you want. With regard to the medical power of attorney, I often ask people, is there anything else you want to put in this document? I have a lot of clients who want to put in a statement of religious belief. I have a lot of clients who say, my dog has to be here. I don't want to die without my dog, right? I mean, who wouldn't want their dog or cat? I'm not a cat person, but if you happen to be of that persuasion, suggest they have your cat, soft music, candles. Tell me, we can put that in the document. Give me some guidelines that will help your agent make decisions that you would make, right? Because these documents are not about me. And they're not about your agents, they're about you. What is it that you want? But see, if you've gone to one of these attorneys up here, they're not even asking that question. They're not even asking you. They're not listening when you tell them the story about how attached you are to your dog, that you don't fly anywhere because you can't take your pet with you. Right? Like these are the statements that you make that make all the difference between getting an estate plan and getting an estate plan that fits what you want. Make sense? Okay. We're going to totally switch gears now. We're going to talk about money. Oh, I have lots of time. Estate plans are only a little about money. Most of your estate plan is in those documents that you're going to use while you're alive. A lot of times I have clients who come in and they want to split hairs over whether one kid gets 13% or 15% or, you know, but honestly, you're gone. Why do you really care? And it's not that I don't care, it's that I don't want us to get hung up on 2%, because that's not the point of the estate plan. The point of the estate plan is to dispose of your things efficiently, effectively, wow, I'm having trouble talking today. Efficiently, effectively, and in a way that makes sense to you, and 2% just doesn't really factor into that. You know, let's talk about what's really gonna happen. I have a lot of clients who come in and they're like, I wanna cut my kid out. Okay, so you're setting yourself up for a will contest, which is gonna make your probate extremely expensive. Sometimes that's just the way it's gonna be. The kid's gonna be cut out. If you can explain to me why that's a better solution and you're willing to deal with the will contest later, then fine, you can have what you want. I want you to understand what repercussions might fall out later. Most of the time, we can solve that problem by giving the kid something. Maybe they get a 10% instead of a 50% share. Maybe it's a 10-90 split. Maybe they get granddad's Rolex. Maybe they get something that keeps them from contesting your will. Right? Like there are lots of ways to smooth over these rough family relationships. I don't want to get hung up over the cash. I just don't. And I don't think you should be hung up over the cash either. Let's just decide who's going to get it and what they're going to get and put it on paper and move on. Because we have more important things to talk about, right? I'm not saying this isn't an important part of your estate plan. It's very important, but we don't want to get caught up in details that in the long run aren't going to matter. 90% of the time, the first person I say, what is your goal in establishing this estate plan? They say, I want to stay out of probate if I can, which that's negotiable, and I want my estate to be easy to process. I want my personal representative to have an easy time distributing my estate. So if we're creating all these will contests, that doesn't meet your goal. And I will often say to a client, okay, we're going to choose the will contest. What do we do with this goal of easy administration? Have you changed your mind about this being a goal? Because if you have, I have some other suggestions. Yeah.
You mentioned neurocognitive.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about dementia?
Yeah, so I can't speak to dementia specifically because when a client comes to me, I'm really looking at the whole basket of neurocognitive illnesses. Your entire estate plan has to be done before you lose competence. Competence has a very low bar, but a lot of these neurocognitive illnesses get to that bar pretty quickly. Like if you know, my basic thing is, do you know who the prominent people in your life are? And do you know what you have? Like that's essentially it. Those are the two things that I'm concerned about the most. If you are in full-blown dementia care, we are not going to have a conversation. We just can't. I can't. I can charge you to draft up all these documents, but none of them are going to be valid. your better bet is to find yourself a guardian and a conservative, or to have not you yourself, but have somebody assign a guardian and a conservator. And have them help you make these decisions depending on the scope of the guardian or conservatorship agreement. So a guardian is for your medical, a conservator is for your financial. Depending on the scope of the agreement, they may be able to do these documents for you, but not always, and not with me. There are attorneys who specialize in doing these types of estate plans. I'm not one of them, so I can't speak terribly intelligently much beyond that.
So a diagnosis of dementia or Alzheimer's or whatever does not necessarily mean that you can't
Correct.
still, because it's just depending on where you are in that.
Yeah, and there are attorneys who are really good at that, at determining when someone has crossed over that competence line. And I know I've had clients who have great days and who have not great days. And on a day when they have a great day, I pick up my computer and I go. We're doing that estate plan today because we can meet competence today. And I don't like doing it that way, but Kimberly and I, for example, shared a client where time was of the essence. And he was competent for a very long period of time, and we got his estate plan done, and what was it, a month? A couple of months later, he was gone. And without that estate planning, his wife would have been left with a disaster. So, but I was comfortable in that situation because when I talked to him, you would never know in conversing with him that he had 2 or 3 different diagnoses. You would never know. And within a month, he was in assisted living. So, but his estate was extremely easy to administer. There was virtually nothing to be done but file a death certificate with the clerk and recorder. So that was a win. I was proud of that one. So real estate is always the hang-up, right? This is why I don't want to spend too much time on the dollars and cents, because we need to figure out what's going to happen with your house. You know what? Before we talk about the house, let me go back to probatable and non-probatable assets. So you have, from my perspective, you have 2 types of assets. Some assets are eligible for probate and some are not. If you have retirement accounts, you have investment accounts of any kind, including stocks, bonds, CDs, bank accounts, checking accounts, those do not have to be probatable. And probatable in a lawyer, an estate attorney would say, no, everything's probatable. But honestly, these are things that pass outside of the estate. If you have a retirement account, life insurance, or any kind of life insurance, an annuity, all of those things pass outside of probate because they're contractual relationships. You signed a contract with your investment company for those investments. And when you signed that contract, your investment advisor said, who do you want to get this when you die? And you put those names down. Those are your beneficiaries. You don't have to open probate for that to pass. That's a contractual relationship. So as soon as you die, a death certificate goes to the investment advisor and they make it happen. Nothing probatable about it. Life insurance, same way. Provide a death certificate, life insurance goes to the beneficiary. Retirement accounts are a whole different thing. They operate the same way. However, it depends on the type of, they never go into probate. Let me put it that way. Your retirement account will never go into probate unless there's something contestable, and I don't even know if that's possible because I don't even deal with that. But retirement accounts vest at different times for different people. And there's a book by Natalie Choate that's about that thick and about this big that is all of the rules for the distribution of retirement accounts in estates. All right, and I'm gonna simplify this for you. Every 2 to 3 years, you should go into your retirement account and make sure the beneficiary designation is correct, and then we don't have to have this conversation at all. And I like that because I'm out of my depth here. You don't need to mess with those three areas. Just make sure your beneficiary designations are correct. Checking accounts, savings accounts, CDs, anything that you have with a bank, put a beneficiary designation on them. If you don't have one, do it. It's a nice idea that your agent can bring your financial power of attorney into the bank and say, I'm the agent, let me do my thing. The bank will probably say no.
Yeah, sure will.
When my daughter decided to go live in the UK, we did powers of attorney for her, and we took our financial power of attorney in, and I said, look, I'm the agent, and the bank said, no, you're not. Here's 20 more things you need to fill out, plus your ID, and your passport, and your firstborn, and then you can be the agent on this account. Right? So this is something you have to set up ahead of time. Once you get your agent, your financial power of attorney, take it to the bank and have them do their thing, because there's going to be a bunch of other paperwork that needs to go with it. All right, I totally lost track of where I was. Yeah.
My son lives in a different state, and he will be the one that is in charge of it all. So should I get him to go to the bank and have him as a power of attorney?
You need to go.
You go.
I need to.
Yeah.
You need to go.
And put him down as a.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have our children as our pay from death. Is that the same thing?
Yep, same thing.
Same thing. You
Yep.
don't need to do the power of attorney thing necessarily.
Well, that's two different things.
It's two different things. So if you do the pay on death for the bank, then you probably don't need the power of attorney for that. You need the power of attorney for other things. Yeah.
Just while you're alive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Power.
Yep. Yeah, and it's always a shocker for adult children when after a parent dies, they go to the bank to try to make transactions, and the bank says, sorry, not happening.
But they can get all the money now.
Well, they file a death certificate, and then, the beneficiary is honored. The pay on death is honored. Yeah. But a lot of people don't even know that's possible, and banks are notorious for not telling you that you can have a beneficiary designation on your checking account. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to real estate unless anybody has any other questions about that. Okay? Yeah, Heather.
Just a quick comment on the payable on death for bank accounts. Most banks, credit unions are the worst. They want the official certificate from the state. So if you need any bills paid between the time you die and the time the family gets that death certificate, the family's not going to be able to touch the bank account unless you are named on the account unless they have a record that you were the power of attorney or your name is actually listed on the account as a signer or something before you die.
Yeah, and list people as a signer. Do not put them on as a joint owner.
Right, just a second.
That's a bad idea.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about that more in a second with regard to real estate. Okay, so real estate. This is your probatable asset. This is often the thing that pushes someone into probate. Okay? So the first thing, as an estate attorney, I do, like I said, is I pull an ownership and encumbrance report and I make sure that everything on there on your current deed is correct. Because if it's not, that is the first thing we're going to do is a corrective deed, because we can't do anything with your property if it isn't titled correctly and properly described. And occasionally, it's not what somebody did on your end, it is the clerk misfiled the document. I've had one case in the last 13 years where I had to call the mortgage company, because I think it was the mortgage company that filed the deed, title company filed the deed, and it was misfiled by the clerk and recorder. And we had to have that corrected because the ownership wasn't properly documented at all. But the ownership and encumbrance report also tells me who has liens on your property, and that can also limit what you can do with your property. So I need that report to tell me what the status of your property is so that I know what choices you have when you go to distribute it. Okay? So the first thing you need to know is this magic number up here, this $86,000. This is the limit. I never quite know how to say this. If you have fewer than $86,000 in assets after you die, you don't need to file for probate. Okay? You only need $86,000 or more. Well, guess what? If you own a house, if you own a piece of barren property riddled with dandelions, you have more than $86,000 in Colorado. Period. This is a state law. This is not federal. This is state. So $86,000 is the magic number. So real estate then becomes your biggest probatable asset for normal people like you and me. Rich people, people with millions and millions and millions, they have different issues. I don't work with those people. I work with people like me. So this was the number for 2025. This usually goes up a little bit each year. I could not find a 2026 number, probably because we're all still waking up from our food coma. So, but I couldn't find. So it might be slightly higher for this year. If your estate is under $86,000, we have what's called a small estate affidavit, and you can use that to transfer your property around. Okay. If you have a fancy schmancy sports car, you're probably over this $86,000. But there are ways, we have some tools to deal with the car, much like we have tools to deal with the house.
Is this amount equity or value of the asset?
It's actual dollars.
But if you own the home, just like a sports car for 100,000, but you owe, like you're paying the loan.
Yeah, you owe 80 on it, right?
80 on it, that's only $20,000 back.
Okay, so let me put it this way. So I don't do probate, so I don't actually work. I don't actually work with the numbers. But for an estate attorney that does what I do, 86, the value is what makes it probatable. Once you start taking things out of it, it may turn out to be less than that. Right? Because like you said, I mean, and this is always the question with the reverse mortgage. I have a $300,000 condo, but I have a reverse mortgage for a certain percentage of that, whatever the percentage was at the time they took out their reverse mortgage. And so what does that mean? Well, but the condo is going to bring in $350,000. And then out of that $350,000, you're going to pay the second mortgage back, or the first lien holder, or whatever. You're going to pay off whatever debt is on the house. I don't actually know how that works in probate, because I don't deal with probate. But I just say, if the house is over $350,000, if it's over $86,000, we're going to deal with it in your will. Unless we decide to make another move, right? So over 86, we are going to have a conversation about what we're going to do with this property after your death. And so what are your choices? Well, one is you intend to sell. If you're going to sell in the next 3 to 4 years, then that's a plan you need to make and you need to implement. Still, it goes in the will, because what if you don't sell it? What if you die next week, right? So I will often put, especially when it comes to second, third homes, rental properties, I will put in the will, if I still own this property at my death. Then if you've sold the property, great. We just strike that provision and we move on with the rest of the will. Okay? A couple of other things that you can do. First of all, the thing you're not going to do is put your kid on your deed. Please don't do that. You have now made a taxable gift. And that never ends well for anyone, especially if you think that Medicaid or a spend down may be in your future. You have now created a virtual nightmare for both yourself and the person you put on your deed. I have been able to fix this in some counties with a corrective deed, but the county doesn't always buy that argument. So sometimes you plop somebody on your deed, you're stuck with them. And this can create more problems. I mean, I don't have the time to go into the kinds of problems you can have when you do that. So please don't do that. Beneficiary deeds are great. Beneficiary deeds are pay on death deeds. When you die, your kid takes, or whoever is going to get your property is going to take a death certificate to the clerk and recorder. And the clerk and recorder hands them a deed and says, congratulations, you now own this home. I wish it were that simple. It's not. There are a lot of factors that go into distributing a property with a beneficiary deed. Whether you get a beneficiary deed or not depends on your circumstance and the circumstance of the recipient. If I have now a grandfather who wants his grandson to have his house. His grandson lives in the house with him. He cares for him. He's grew up in that house. The kid wants the house. And if the grandfather sold the house, the kid would be homeless. He wants his grandson to have the house. This is the perfect situation for a beneficiary deed because the recipient intends to live in the home. Yeah.
So, my husband and I are both on our house.
Yeah.
Should we do that for each other then too?
No, you don't have to.
We don't have to.
But the first thing I would look at is how your deed is titled. Are you tenants in common or are you joint tenants? Because that's a different thing.
Okay.
If you're tenants in common, your kid is going to inherit your property. Let me say that a different way, because that is deceptive. So if you die before your husband, your kids are going to inherit your 50%.
Instead of my husband getting it.
And if your husband needs to sell the house because he needs the money to live on, your kids can prevent him from doing that because they're owners.
If we're tenants in common.
So joint and several liability, when one person on the deed dies, then the others receive their shares just divided up.
So it should be joint.
Joint and several. Joint and several. Oh my God.
Joint tenancy.
Joint tenancy.
And that is important to check, because I've had clients
To check that.
that all of a sudden they realize, oh, wait a minute, this is tenants in common.
Yeah, and it
Especially if
isn't.
you have blended families and different things.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily a bad thing
No,
to be
usually
tenants in
no.
common. That may be the way you want the property distributed.
Definitely not.
But the way the way you want your property distributed needs to be reflected in how you've checked that box. And for some people, tenants in common is the right choice. But not everybody. But that's like one of the first things I check. I need to know how that property's held, and I want to know if that is the way you want it to be held. And it's confusing when you read the definition of those two things. It doesn't necessarily make sense unless you work in this industry, right? Sherry, how often do you have to explain that to clients?
Well, every time, because you can have a purchase contract, let's say home buyers, you can have a purchase contract as two names, and then in there, when you make a purchase contract, you select how you're gonna take title, joint tenancy, tenants in common, other, like a sublettee, one person. And then, but before closing, I always double check, you explain once, but when you're trying to buy a house, young couple, they're not, they're talking about price and getting the house under contract. But before closing, okay, well, you selected joint tenancy, this comes with the right of survivorship. If one party dies, the other person owns 100% of it automatically. But like you mentioned, the blended family, their second marriage and they have heirs, I'll make sure this is what it means. And then, you can change it, finalize it before closing, because the title company will record the ownership, the deed. you know, based on what you choose for the tenant type of, you know.
Yeah, and anybody here not ever buy a house? Like, you know how overwhelming that is?
Yeah.
This is the last thing.
It's
you
not
care
the
about,
first
is
thing
what's
to
gonna
your
happen at the other end. Okay, usually I like to distribute property through a will. That is my number one preference. Kimberly?
No, I was just saying.
Oh, okay. That's my number one preference because it's so flexible. Does it require probate? Yes. Probate is $149 in Colorado. It is intended to be done by individuals, not by attorneys. You can always get an attorney. If you find the right attorney, you'll find somebody who can kind of guide you through the process without taking it over for you. Contested probate, hire an attorney. Your personal representative just needs an attorney.
Some states it's pretty brutal, right? Colorado, it's
Yeah, so
California, New York.
everything that I just said, I said because we live in Colorado. There is no estate tax here. It says right on your little magic numbers form. We have zero estate tax. It doesn't matter how much money flows through your estate. We have zero inheritance tax. You can receive as much money as you want or as is available through an estate. If it passes outside of the estate, for example, you put your kids on the title, those are taxable events, folks. You're allowed $19,000 per person in a marriage per person recipient. So if you have 4 kids, you and your husband can give each kid $19,000 a year.
Tax-free.
Tax-free. Anything over that is a taxable event. And that's not a good place to be. That's not the situation you want to put your kids in when they could have taken all this money tax-free. There are times when I recommend that distributions like that be made annually. I have a client right now who is paying one of his kids $19,000 a year to catch him up to some money that he loaned the other kid. And we don't want to do that through his estate plan because she's the personal representative, she won't have the money to do it. So I'm having him do it now, right? Sometimes we recommend that you do that, but for the most part, you gotta stay within that $19,000 a year. Okay. Federal tax does not kick in until your estate reaches $15 million per person in a marriage. Yeah, so so unless you have that kind of dough hanging around, we don't really necessarily do federal tax planning, other than to remind you that there are taxable events. All right, did I miss any on here? I didn't. Okay, the federal tax limit bumps up usually a little bit each year. It did not bump up for 2026, but 19 grand is a lot of money to give to people. Here are some taxable events that you probably don't have on your radar. I can't claim to be an expert on step-up in basis because I'm not, because I don't do probate. However, when you are passing property outside of an estate, you have to have your eye on basis. So I'm going to give you a beneficiary deed example that I had come across my desk recently. Beneficiary deed was used to pass on title to a house. So you get a step up in basis at the death.
What does that mean, step up in basis?
So you paid $150,000 for your house. You sell it 5 years later for $300,000. Your basis is $150,000. So you will pay tax on the $150,000 that it increased in that 5 years. Okay? And this is true for stock investments. It's true for all kinds of things. But I want to talk particularly about houses because we are talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, especially here in Colorado where some of us bought our houses for $250,000 and they're now worth over $1 million. This is a lot of money. You beneficiary deed your property to a kid. The kid takes possession, or at least in title, to the house. The kid doesn't know what to do with it. So they hang on to it. And it just sits there for 2 or 3 years. And then they go to sell it. If you live in Colorado, that house probably increased in value substantially. Their basis only dates back to the date of death. So what they're going to get at the end is a tax bill on the amount of increase. So this is one of the things about a beneficiary deed is you need to know that that beneficiary deed is going to be acted on immediately after death. If they're going to take possession, they're either going to live in the house or they're going to sell it right away. And I'm sorry, but knowing how long it takes for a referral to get from the referrer's mouth to my desk, I have no faith that people turn around and sell those houses right away. And in the meantime, who's paying all the bills? The person you are trying to benefit is paying the utilities, is keeping the water flowing so that you don't have frozen pipes. They're doing all the upkeep, the maintenance, they're paying the taxes. So, I mean, you really have to think through whether you want to give that house to somebody or you want to give them the option to sell it in the estate and have the cash go to the recipient tax-free. That's a big, that's a big thing. And that's a lengthy conversation for my clients. We spend a lot of time talking about that.
And that step-up clause often becomes an issue when you mention do not add your kids to the deed.
Yeah.
With an intention to, this way we can avoid probate.
Yeah.
Some people just do it without an attorney and then, I'm going to add my kids, name to my deed so they don't have to go through probate or any tax consequences. And when people do that, if I add my kid to the deed today, if I die today and the kid inherited, the step-up basis is as of today. If the whole home is worth $500,000, the kid's not owing the tax for carry capital gain. But if I add my kid that he's part of the house that I bought 30 years ago, then he's responsible for pay taxes on that.
Yeah, they don't get that nice step up.
Profit, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they don't get the full benefit of the step up. Yeah. So this is also true when you put a house into a trust. You lose the tax advantages because trusts are always taxed. And irrevocable trust, which is what happens to a revocable trust when the grantor settlor dies, that trust becomes irrevocable. And irrevocable trusts are taxed at the highest tax rate. It can be as much as 35 or 40%. Wow. So when you're using a trust, sometimes we have to, and you just need to know that there's going to be a tax disadvantage at the other end. But if you have a blended family and you are concerned about your spouse redirecting those funds to their children instead of yours, then that's a better trade-off, quite honestly, than leaving your kids without any income. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I got.
Thank you. Thank you.